Okay, now we're going to start baking. We've got our models from ZBrush. I'm just going to import those files. Just go import. Let's see, I'm going to import the high and the low to make sure that they match. Now I've turned the shield up like this so that I can get a better angle at it inside Substance Painter. This is my low poly. We unwrapped it last time. And I'm going to turn on my high poly. I want to make sure that my low poly is hidden underneath my high poly, because anything that shows through won't bake properly. I'm going to export my low poly, file, export, export selected, and I'm going to make sure I put this in the same folder. And I'm going to call this shield low poly, and I'm going to save it as an FBX. I'm going to hide that, and I'm going to grab my high poly, file, export, export selected, and I'm going to name this one high poly FBX, or shield high poly FBX. Got to give it a second to export all the different objects. Now I'm going to jump into Substance Painter, and I always turn off my high poly so that it's not loaded in 3ds Max's memory, so it's not subtracting from it. No, 2 versions of it. That's a mistake. I'm going to go to File, New. I'm going to find my low poly. 2048 is fine. 4096 is better if your computer can handle it. It's just a larger texture. You hit OK. If I hold down Alt and I click, I can drag the object around. If I hold down Shift and right click, I can rotate. I suggest setting up your Wacom tablet so that you have middle click on your, if I just go WAC, Wacom tablet properties. When I go through here, I'm just going to set this back button to right click and this front one is middle click. And it just lets me move and deal with things faster. I'm going to bake in this texture section. I'm going to go down. I'm going to go bake maps. I'm going to hold down Alt and I just want this normal map on for speed. I'm going to click find my high poly and I'm just going to hit bake. Now we've got a couple of areas that have a little bit of trouble, places that are showing through. I'm just going to hit OK. I'm going to go to bake maps and I'm going to turn up this frontal distance just a little bit. Bake again. You don't want to go too far, but you also don't want to go, you want to make sure that you're actually getting it. Looks good. Now this is really low resolution, so I could tell so it would load fast. I'm going to go back in here, and all right, now that I know this works, I'm going to set this up to 2048, and I'm going to turn on these. I don't need thickness because this is subsurface scattering. Basically, it makes things like skin or wax. I want world space normals. I want IDs, which you'll see why we need those in a moment. Ambient occlusion is darkness, which we always meet. Curvature is, it figures out where the edges of the model are. And position says which way is up. I'm just going to hit bake. And you'll see the maps being built here. That's world space normal. The purple one's normal. And there's ambient occlusion. Curvature should be next. Finding the edges is what a curvature does. And what I need is my ID map. I want each one of the objects, the pieces of wood, the metal, everything to be on a separate layer, but it's all red. So what I need to do is come in, and I'm just going to hide all these. If I hold down Alt, I can just get one. I'm going to go click it, and it'll bring me down to another menu. I'm going to click Material, and I'm going to say Mesh ID Polygroup. Hit Bake, and this is called an ID map, and you'll see why it's useful in a moment. I'm just going to delete this normal layer. And let's start working. I'm just going to find a metal in my material editor. I'm just going to go metal and see what they've got. I'm just going to drag this raw iron. I'm just going to set it here. And I need to make sure that I'm checking my reference and I'm not just doing it randomly because I want it to look like the shield. And actually, I think this one will be okay. And now I want a wood. And let's see what they've got. Let's try this rough wood. I think that will probably do. And what materials do we have? Wood and metal. I think we're good. And I want to, I think what? I want the wood to be in certain spots, and I want the metal to be in other spots. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to take this wood, and I'm going to add a mask. Add white mask, except for, I'm going to go down and I'm going to say add mask to color selection. And this little color picker, if I made my ID map correctly, I can just select these different colors and they'll only be there. And I just keep picking. But I want them to seem like they're separate boards. So I'm just going to cancel that out. And this wood, I'm going to put it in a group. I'm just going to make a group and I'm just going to say wood. I'm going to drag this one into it. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to make this one yellow like wood. And here, I'm just going to duplicate this layer by hitting Control D. I'm going to go to color selection and I'm going to pick another piece of wood. I'm just going to do this again. And the reason I want to be able to do this is let's go to the bottom here, and the wood's not facing the right direction. I'm going to turn the others off so they're less distracting. And this menu, I don't want it here anymore, so I'm just going to go to Windows, View, Assets, so I have more room to see. The wood's going the wrong direction, so I'm just going to click on this. There's the mask layer, and then there's this layer, which is the base color. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go to Rotation. I'm just going to rotate it until I get the same direction. And then I think the wood texture is too big. So I'm going to go up to Scale, put down something like that. And you can always type the number up here. Now, I don't need the metalness layer, how metal this object is. No, I guess I do because this isn't a metal, so I need it to be in here to say it's not a metal. Then I'm going to go roughness, height map. Yeah, I think I'll keep that. Now, the roughness, let's go down to our materials. I can turn the roughness down and get a glossy wood, but that's not what wood is. Wood, especially old dried wood, is pretty much has no, I'm holding shift and right clicking to drag her along. It's more like that. And I'm just going to do that to each of these. And this one has two, so I'm just going to get off the red one. Just going to go back here. I'm just going to rotate. And I don't want them to be in the same spot, so I can also offset. It's just moving the texture around. And I actually want this texture to be just a little bit a different color from this one, so it's more obvious. So I'm just going to select it, and I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to Add Levels. I'm just going to make it more obvious that it's a separate board. Next one, rotation. And I'm going to say Add Levels. There we go. Next. And this one below it, I'm going to add a levels as well. Just want it to be obvious that it's made of a bunch of separate boards. Now that we've got something done on the boards, I'm going to go to the metal layer, and I'm going to add it to a folder. I'm just going to call this metal. And I'm going to leave it gray. And I want a rust layer. I'm going to make that myself. I'm just going to click fill. And I need this to be like a reddish orange. I need to turn down the roughness, so just scroll down. I'm going to turn the roughness because rust is really rough. Like there. And a little bit darker. And this rust is everywhere. Now, if you see these little sections here, what this is anywhere you draw a seam, it's going to have those little sections where they don't connect well. So we don't want those to exist as much as possible, but most people aren't going to notice them. You want to hide them as best you can with other objects and pieces of your material. I want this rust to be all over this object, but not uniformly like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click mask, add a white mask, and if I paint, I can hide the mask like this. And if I go down, I can change. So say I hide this section and I want to bring it back. I can go to 1, bring it back. I can go halfway between and slowly add it, but usually you want to just have 100%. But now that I've got a mask, I'm going to say generator, and generators do some amazing things. I'm just going to hit generator, and I'm going to add this one. I'm going to add dirt. And what dirt's going to do is it's just a random texture that looks like decay. And I'm going to turn up contrast. Just invert it. And what I'm trying to do is just add a little patina of rust everywhere. But I don't like this metal underneath, so I'm going to go to Windows, and I'm just going to make my own metal. I don't like this one. I'm just going to hit fill, and I'm going to say metallic. I'm going to set that all the way to 1, and I'm going to set the roughness. If I set it all the way up, I can get a chrome. But what I want is something rougher than that. And play with the darkness values. This is when you're kind of doing the art thing, which I like a lot. Now, let's see. I've got a little bit of rust everywhere. And all of these cracks I see on this, I want to make them, I'm just going to hide this rust layer. I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer. I'm going to call it metal base. Hide the layer underneath it. These default materials, see how it has this weird height map problem? I can fix that by going down in the iron and turning its height off, like that. And on ours, I can turn the height up. You can't see it yet, but you will see it as soon as we get to this next section. I'm going to duplicate this metal base, and I'm going to call this damage. And I'm going to change this material so it's more obvious what's happening. I'm going to say that this material is quite a bit more reflective, like almost a chrome. I'm going to say this entire shield is chromy when they first made it, like really nice and shiny. And I'm going to change the color to black so that it's obvious what's happening here. I want to show the chrome parts only in places that wouldn't be damaged over time. Like the edges would get really roughed up. And so I'm going to make this black only show through in sections, like imagine it's paint. Anywhere that would get scratched off, like these surfaces here, the chrome will only show up in the middle. I'm just going to add a mask. I'm going to add a generator. And I'm going to add curvature. It's going to look for the edges of my model. And you see where it's putting all the black only on the edges. I can hit invert and have it only on the insides. So those are the places that would be chrome. And if I turn up these settings, I can move it into more areas. Like there's oil caked in those sections. And global blur will cause it to go outside of those. I'm going to turn that down. Contrast makes these edges harder. But if I do this, I'm going to take this from black, go back to my metal, go back to my generator by clicking the mask, and going down to the curvature section. I'll turn my rust back on. I think the rust is actually too powerful, so I'm going to go down to its layer. I'm going to say orange amount up. There's less of it. Now what I want to do is on these sections of wood, I'm going to add a mask so that I can never paint on the metal section. So I'm going to grab the folder and I'm going to hit Add Color Selection Mask. I'm going to select this section. I'm just going to, so I can never, anything I do inside this folder will never affect anywhere else. I'm going to go up one. And what I want to do is this dirt, I want to make sure that in all the cracks it gets darker. So I'm just going to add a new fill layer, and I'm going to make sure it's pretty rough. Maybe like that. And I don't need the metallic layer or the height or the normal. I just want these two. I'm going to pick a dark kind of brown, something like that. And I'm going to add a mask, add a generator, go back to curvature. And that's way too strong. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to where the curvature section is. And just invert this to get the result I'm looking for. So I'm just going to say invert. That actually looks pretty good, because that's showing the sculpting detail that we put in. And now what I want to do is I want at the edges of this, I want to have a highlight. So I'm just going to make another layer. And I don't care about metal, normal, height. I just want the roughness. And I want a light yellow, light orange, probably something like that. Add a mask, add a generator, curvature. And to make this more obvious, I'm just going to click on it And I'm going to turn this up to white so I know exactly where it's going. So what I'm looking for is I want it to be on the edges where the wood touches. And I'm going to turn it back down. Turn up the blur a little bit. Just want a little bit on the edges. And now I'm going to add some moss and dirt in the cracks. So I'm just going to make a new layer. I'm going to say, I want to make this a green. Green always has a little bit of yellow in it. Kind of dark, a little less saturated. And I want it to be really rough. And I'm going to add a mask. I can paint it out if I want, but I like the generator system quite a bit. Add generator. And I'm going to go, instead of curvature, I'm going to go to ambient occlusion. It's like curvature, but it's looking for dark spots. I just want to put this little bit of moldy, gross moss in the cracks. And I'm going to turn this layer down. I'm just going to go over here, 100. I need to be on the opposite to do that. Let's see. There we go. I want to do less than that. All right. Now I want to add that white circle. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to add a new layer, fill layer. I'm going to make it white. And I always put a little bit of color in my white, something like that. Its roughness is going to be paint, so it's going to be smoother than everything else. It's not going to be metallic. I don't need normal. I'm going to hide this really quick. Yeah, that'll work. Now I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to add a mask, and I'm going to say a black mask. I'm going to make sure I name this layer. Paint. And this time, I'm going to be painting this section on. I have my size up here, my stroke opacity, which changes how bright or dark it is. And turn it up. And you can see this brush is really smooth. And I really like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an alpha. So I'm going to go up to the section called grayscale. I'm going to click it. And I'm going to just delete anything that's up here. I'm going to type in alpha. I'm going to find myself a brush that's more like a paintbrush. Probably won't find the perfect thing, but just something that's more blobby-like. Do this. And it's got some height map on it like that. And a little bit of chaos. Something like maybe this. Now, the reason this is doing this is because I've got a height map on this paint channel. And I'm just going to go over here and turn off the height. I'm just going to say no height. I'm going to turn the spacing down. That's actually a cool brush. It's got extra settings in there. I'm going to change that to grab something more simple. That actually do it. What I'm trying to do is make this look like the painted circle. And there's an eraser tool over here. I can erase stuff if I want to. But I can also go down to change my color. Now there's our issue. I loaded it into the wrong spot. I'm just going to right click and then hit remove mask. I'm going to add a new mask, add a black mask, so that I can add and take away. And let's add a paint layer really quickly. Paint layer is going to let me add the alpha where I want it to. Something like you. And we're still in the wrong spot. I don't like you there. I was one too low. There we go. Just trying to figure out exactly where a good spot. All right, and now I want this to be more white. I'm trying to roughen this down so it's I'm going to give it a height map. I'm just going to say this thing pushes up because it's paint. Not quite so high. And I don't want it to be in all the cracks like that. So I'm just going to add, I'm going to say this is paint, a folder. I'm going to drag the paint in. And I'm going to add a mask to this layer, add a white mask, add a generator, add a scope ambient occlusion. And I'm looking for the cracks. Play with these values, see what I can get. It looks like ambient occlusion is not the best choice for this, so I'm just going to click generator up here, and I'm going to pick the curvature. and contrast. I'm going to turn that whiteness up some more. Turn this roughness down. Now, that white circle is a little too clean, but we're going to say this is fine. And I'm going to make sure that I file save as this file so I don't have to make it again. And I'm just going to go to File, and now I'm going to get the textures out. What I'm going to do is go to Export Textures, and I'm going to go to, this is where you save your files. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to save this, my 3D section. I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call this Textures. Select, now I'm going to say this is the output template. I'm just going to scroll all the way down to the bottom until I get to Unreal SSS Pack, Subsurface Scattering. I'm going to click that. Now, the other settings you don't really need to know about so much because they're not important for what you're doing. This size section, whatever your textures are, like you can change it to lower it here really quickly. I'm just going to hit Export. It's going to cook the textures. And then what I can do is go to Open Directory, and I can look at the textures to see if they worked out. So the unwrap looks good. This is a combination of several things. It's the roughness and metalness in one texture. And this is really good for Unreal, but I didn't get my base color out. All I've got is this gray. And so what I need to do is get those textures. I'm just going to go to Output Templates. I'm going to go to Unreal Packed. And I'm just going to say, hey, duplicate this. And if I grab it, I'm just going to rename it Unreal. And I'm going to call this JMS Export. Just hit Enter. And now I'm going to adjust this Unreal one. I'm going to actually start totally from scratch. I'm going to say, I want an RGB. This is a colored texture, and I want it to be from my diffuse and drag it into the RGB channels. I'm going to add another, I'm going to add a, let's say a gray, and this one, I want it to be my normal, or my normal map. No, that needs to be a color map. So let me just back this one out. RGB, normal map. Now I need my diffuse. I want a metallic. So I'm going to say metallic is a black and white map. So I'm going to hit gray, metallic. Is that an ambient occlusion? And so we've got a diffuse, normal, and I'm going to make sure I name these. I call this diff, norm. I'm going to call this AO. And this last one, where did you go? No, you're metallic. This one's AO, for ambient occlusion. I think that's all the ones that we actually need. I want to get out my ID map as well, so I'm going to hit RGB. I'm just going to name this one ID. All right. So now we're good. I'm going to go back to settings. I'm going to click. I'm going to go down to where I find 9. and save to the same spot. I'm going to textures. I'm going to get rid of these. Hit export. Now I need my diffuse. All right. I'm going to go back to output. And in my diffuse, from this section, does not look like I'm getting. So I'm just going to grab converted maps and diffuse. I'm going to drag that over here. RGB, settings, material 2. I'm clicking on this because I don't want to export these because they all worked. I just want the diffuse. I'm going to have global settings, export. That's the one. So this is the base texture, and it's dilating and going all the way out until it touches another piece so that there's no breakup in the map. This is AO with dark spots each in the middle. This is my ID map. This is my roughness map. No, this is my metallic map. And my normal map. Oh, we need one more map. We need roughness. Output template. Roughness is a black and white map, so I'm just going to call this one rough. And I'm just going to go roughness channel. Settings. There we are. White is as rough as it can be, and black is glossy. All right. Next time, I'll show you how to put these onto material inside 3ds Max. I guess we could start that really quick. Just make sure you name everything and save it to a good folder, so in case you need to come back. So inside 3ds Max, just press G. And I'm going to press M on my keyboard to bring up my material editor. I'm going to grab a physical material. Now, this is something that's kind of annoying about Max. Hopefully they'll fix it. I have to drop these one at a time instead of being able to just grab a few of them and drop them. It'll only grab one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this to base color, and I can drag this onto my object like that. Now what I'm going to do is I need my metallic. This is AO, which will scoot you down here, and my metal is white with black centers. So my metalness is here. And I'm going to clean up this list so that it looks as good as possible. And this must be my roughness channel. I'm going to go roughness. And my normal map is bump. And I think we're good here. Now, what I need to do is I need to add a light to be able to see it. And so I'm going to add an Arnold light. Pretty sure that by default, if I hit F9 to render, see there's nothing for this to reflect. So I'm going to press M on my keyboard, and I'm going to create a high dynamic range image lighting, HDRI, and type that in up here and drag this over. It's going to ask me to find an HDR sky. That's just any picture of a sky. And I'm going to go to museum, textures, skies. I'm just going to grab something like this. And now I'm going to press 8 on my keyboard to go to Rendering, Environment. I'm going to drag this over to here. Hit OK. And what this is doing is it's going to load this picture in my background. Now I'm going to hit F9 to render again. Now it's never going to be one-to-one what your texture is going to be, so we have to make adjustments. So I'm seeing that this part has become completely black, even though whenever I go into my metal section and I look at it, turn off the rust, these grays. At best, these are middle gray, maybe a little dark gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this back on. I'm going to go to Export Textures. I'm going to go back to my output template, click on my GMS export. This is the one I'm making for you so you can see the difference. What I need is the diffuse, which is here. I'm going to pick a different diffuse. I'm just going to make a second one, RGB. We call this diff 2. And I'm going to grab this diffuse from RGB. And put in there, specular roughness. No. I'm just going to add one more diff 3. And I'm going to grab this diffuse again. And I'm going to say, I've got RGB. Let's go here. Settings. Make sure I've got the same one I had before. Error during log. This means that the diffuse that I picked in this channel is the wrong diffuse. So I need to grab this one. And I'm going to say, can't pick from diffuse. I need to pick from channel. I need to move from the exact same spot. Now, when this happens, and it's going to happen, this is how you fix it. Whenever it's reading my texture wrong, that's what I did this document for. I'm just going to open up Photoshop really quickly. And this is why you want to learn how to do this inside Photoshop first, and then Substance Painter. I'm going to close Substance Painter so I can get some computer power back. I'm just going to drop my diffuse in. I'm going to drop my ID map, not in here. I'm going to drop it over here so it aligns properly with the edges. I'm going to press enter. And now I'm going to press W, which is this magic wand tool. And I'm going to make sure that this is at maybe 35. At 30, if I select black, it'll select any pixel that is within 35 pixel colors of black. So if I pick this one, it's going to grab all of this everywhere. But if I turn this up too much, like 75, it might also grab, or like this one, it's going to grab this. Let's just set it to 100. That's actually too good. Let's go 250. See, it's grabbing both of these. And I'm just going to go back to 35. And this section, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to go over here. And I'm just going to go G, which is the fill tool. And I remember that that is a dark gray. Go to new layer, fill. Now, there's also something that I want. I want these rusty layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control and select this. And I'm just going to, that will give me everything inside that selection. I'm just going to go down and hit Control J to duplicate it. Now I'm going to go to Select, Color Range, and I'm going to select the black. And everything that's black is what it's grabbing. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm just going to hit Delete. And what that's going to give me is I can take this layer and I'm going to put it underneath this one. And now I've got the rust on top of my shield, my gray layer. I'm just going to merge all this down, File, Save As, not Save As, that's not what I want. File, Export, Export as PNG, and I'm going to save it as Diffuse, and this section needs to be called Shield Diffuse. Back into Max, drag this in, and scoop this one back. Hit F9 to render. Part of this is telling me that the light is facing the other direction. And so what I'm going to do is inside of my material editor, I'm just going to click this HDR map. And I'm just going to rotate. And I'm going to set this to high quality so I can see the light. And I'm going to have enough computer power for this one. I'm going to say turn high quality off just for a minute. And I'm going to add in a light. I'm going to go to Arnold lights. Just going to click. And I'm going to change it from quad to point. Press W to go to the move tool. Drag it up. Go to modify. Scroll down. Turn off this normalize energy button. Go to I'm going to turn this light's intensity up, exposure up, not exposure up that high. Now, this is telling me that what it's done is its roughness is very likely in the color map. I'll double click, I can see it. Check out this metalness. I'm going to click on this metalness. I'm just going to click on this, press delete, and I'm going to turn the metalness all the way up. So the metalness was fine. I'm just going to make that. No, not base color, you should go to metalness. I'm going to change the base color. That's more like it. The substance painter, it looks good in its render, but you've got to know how to make it look good in every render, and that's a part of being an artist. So I picked too dark of a gray in Photoshop, so I would just change this part. And that's pretty much the straightforward steps to get everything from Substance Painter. I can keep changing this, but I'm going to leave it here because the tutorial is already long enough. Because you can see how you can change this in Photoshop. No, that's enough. Hopefully this tutorial will help you and you understand how to set up things like this. Make sure that you get a really good render. Press F9, make sure that it's large. If your render is too small, press F10 and pick a larger resolution. I suggest HD TV and selecting something huge like 4K.